Hi there guys, this is a very brief introduction to this video, being my first video to be uploaded in 2017. So Happy New Year to all of you guys. Hope you all had a great Christmas time and New Year celebrations, whatever and however you celebrate. And especially if you spent time with family, because that's the most important part of this time of year, of course. In this review we're going to be looking at a Fuji X30 digital camera, and I will give you prior warning, this is a very long review because it's a full in-depth detailed review where I go through the entire menu system of the camera, including an overview of it and show you samples and what have you. What I'm going to do in the box below is I'm going to add a link to my Flickr account where you can see sample images, and I'm also going to put annotations as to the portions of the video, so you might want to skip if you, for example, just want to know your way through the menu system if you've just bought one. But I would appreciate it if you could watch the video through, and I hope that you get something from this, and appreciate if you could give me a thumbs up if you like it. Once again, Happy New Year guys, and subsequent videos hopefully shouldn't be quite as long as this, so thank you if you stick through this, and we'll see you in the next one. Hi and welcome. In today's video we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Fujifilm X30 digital camera. The Fujifilm X30 was released in August 2014 and is a magnesium alloy bodied, retro styled, modern digital camera with a 12 megapixel X-Trans CMOS sensor. The X-Trans sensor is something that's unique to the Fuji models and used across various models in the range now, and it has a different pixel array to your traditional Bayer sensor, which means it doesn't suffer the aliasing effects that you get with that particular sensor design, and because of that the camera doesn't need an anti-aliasing filter in front of the sensor to reduce those effects, so you get sharper images straight out of camera. Now we're going to take a look around the component parts of the camera. On the front we'll start with the lens cap, which is made of aluminium, nice and sturdy, and is a push friction fit, a nice firm snug fit which is not going anywhere in a hurry, and inside it has a sort of suede textured band which grips onto the ribbed portion of the lens there very firmly, and the same type of material down here which protects the rim and the lens element. Underneath that we have a superb Fujinon lens with a widest aperture of f2 at the 28mm wide angle end of the zoom, and f2.8 at the 112mm long end of the zoom. So it's a good fast lens. You have the silver bar along the top, which has the two microphones, the stereo microphones facing forward. I believe on the X20 they were mounted up on the top there. On this one they're in the front, which theoretically is going to capture sound better when you're facing the camera. You have an autofocus assist LED here, the name of the camera X30, nice and subtle up there. Down here in the corner you have a three-way rocking selector switch, which is to select your focus mode. So you've got singles, which is half press and it will focus and lock, continuous where it will track, and manual where you actually focus with the focus ring. So you can flick very easily and quickly between those. And the final component right on the front of the camera is this button up here, which when pressed selects the function of the control ring, and whichever mode you have it in, it has a standard set function, but by pressing this you can alter that function. I'll just quickly show you on the back screen. So if you press this front button, it will come up with a list, and you can actually turn the control ring and select, so your standard default, which is whichever function you're in, and it will assign to that. So for example, in aperture priority, that will control your aperture. In shutter priority, it will control your shutter, and so on. But you can scroll this up and down and select a different function should you desire, and that button on the front is solely for that purpose. Moving on to the back of the camera, right on the corner, is the manual pop-up flash release button, which is spring loaded. So click that down and the flash pops up, as you can see there. Just slightly to the right of that, you have the play preview button, and then a scroll wheel here which adjusts the diopter in the EVF here. To the right of the EVF you have these two little sensors. These are proximity sensors, so when you raise the camera to your face it will cut off the LCD and light up the EVF. You have two buttons up here which have various different functions depending on the mode that you're in, whether you're in preview mode or whether you're in camera mode or what have you. You have a control wheel, a rotating scroll control wheel here, the auto exposure lock button, a quick menu button setting, main menu, and then all these buttons around here have pre-assigned functions such as timer, macro, autofocus and flash, but you can reassign each and every one of these buttons to a different function should you wish to do so. Down here you have display button, and down over on the right you have a function and stroke Wi-Fi button. We'll look at the function of the buttons in more detail shortly. Moving to the top of the camera, we have a nice little Fujifilm Fujinon lens logo, the pop-up flash that you saw there. We have a hot shoe, which can be used with Fuji specific flashes and third-party flashes. We have a shutter button which nicely has a retro styled screw fitting shutter release, so you can use your old-fashioned syringe type or bulb type shutter releases in there. You have the record button to the right of that, which is recessed with a little red dot on. Again, this can be changed, it's programmable to other functions. And then you have your mode dial here, so you've got your MASP functions as you would find on a fully featured manual camera. You have a panorama function, which is a great fun little thing. You have special settings there, and then you have your regular auto settings and filter advanced, etc. So the good thing about this camera is you can use the MASP modes, the manual aperture shutter and program exposure modes for general shooting and get more control. To the right of that you have a very useful feature, which is a plus or minus 3 times exposure compensation dial. So you can quickly, while you're composing a shot, looking through the viewfinder, the EVF, which will give you a true to life representation of the shot that you're likely to get, the same as the view screen. If it looks overexposed, you can quickly and easily knock that down a stop, 2 stops or 3 stops or anything in between. If it looks underexposed, you can knock it up 1, 2 or 3 stops or anywhere in between very quickly, very easily, without accessing your menu to do so. Also, of course, on the rear of the camera, we've got the view screen, which flips out 45 degrees, so it faces down 45 degrees, which is great for over the head shots, and flips up 90 degrees for waist level shots. Unfortunately, it doesn't flip under, over or around for a selfie mode or videoing yourself, which is a bit of a shame, but it does give you great control with the movability that it has for general shooting, as you can see. Over on the right hand side we have a little access port labelled HDMI. Underneath there you will find your connections for your micro USB, your micro HDMI, and a 2.5mm jack for a microphone in port. The microphone in port, you can also get a specific Fuji shutter release that plugs into there also, and you can set the function in the menu whether it's for a microphone or the shutter release. Underneath the camera We have a tripod mount, which is annoyingly off-center. It's not a deal breaker, but it is a bugbear of mine. I do like my tripod mounts to be centered under the lens because it just makes things like stitch panoramas and the like easier to control, whereas with something like this, to do a stitch panorama you would really need an adapter plate to centralize that. And then you've got the battery door, which has a little flip open catch that pops open like so, and you've got a nice chunky NP95 battery, which has a good high capacity, and you get a good number of shots out of that. It's shaped so it will only insert one way, which is quite a nice little feature. And then just above that you've got the SD card slot. You've also got a little flip out portion here so that you can use a power adapter, which are usually shaped like the battery but plug into the mains, so if you're shooting tethered or in a studio or something like that, then you don't have to rely solely on your battery power. So that's the camera, front, back, sides, bottom and top. And now we'll have a look at some of the features. In this next portion of the video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the on-screen menu system of the X30. So now we're going to take a look at the menu system of the Fuji X30, and we're going to scroll through all the options first. The menu is accessed by the menu OK button in the middle of the D-pad on the right hand side of the screen. If you press that, you'll see on the left hand side, I'll do it from this side so I'm not obscuring the viewfinder there. As you can see, the face detection viewfinder. On the left hand side you've got 4 red tabs with a camera icon depicting your camera settings, and 4 blue tabs with a spanner icon depicting your system settings. Up on the very top you've got the mode that you're currently in this case shutter priority, and this will reflect manual aperture priority, etc. accordingly. And then your options underneath are your autofocus settings, your ISO, image size, image quality, dynamic range, film simulation. Onto screen 2, as you scroll up and down with the D-pad, this will automatically go down through the pages, but you have to flick over to get to the system settings, which I'll show you shortly. So onto page 2 you've got film simulation bracketing, the self timer, interval timer shooting for intervalometer shooting, white balance, colour, sharpness, highlight tone. Onto page 3 you've got shadow tone, noise reduction, intelligent digital zoom, which you can switch on or off, advanced anti-blur, which you can switch on or off, currently off in this case, select custom setting, edit save custom setting, and face detection. And then onto page 4 you have photometry, which is your metering system, interlock spot, auto exposure and focus area, manual focus assist, which is focus peaking, control ring setting, which is the control ring on the front of the camera as mentioned previously with the quick setting button on the front, flash setup, movie setup and wireless communication. Now you'll notice if I press down again this automatically pops back to number 1 of the camera settings. To access the system settings we need to, using the D-pad, we need to skip across to the left until it highlights that and then flick down to the system settings and then back to the right. Under the system settings menu we have date and time, time differences, your time zones, language, reset, silent mode, control ring, focus check. On page 2 we have sound setup, screen setup, function setting, selector button setting, edit and save quick menu, power management, in-body stabilization mode. On page 3 we have red eye removal, auto exposure autofocus lock mode, auto exposure autofocus lock button, save data setup, focus scale units, feet or meters, etc., wireless settings, PC auto save settings. And then on page 4 we have geotagging setup, Instax printer connection settings, because of course it's Fuji, which makes it compatible with their Fuji Instax camera, edit file name and format. And likewise when you scroll down from there it will skip back to page 1 of the settings, and to get back to the camera settings we need to go back to the left, scroll up and then back across. We're now going to look into the sub-menus of each item, and I will explain some things as I go through, but not everything. Some things because I'm not 100% entirely familiar with myself, or I didn't have to use wire during the use of this camera, and some other things just because they're not particularly relevant to day-to-day use and shooting. But if there's anything that you want to know that I don't cover, just give me a shout out in the comments below and I will try my best to get back to you with an answer on that. So first of all, we have the autofocus setting. Now you can access the submenu by clicking on the right button on the D-pad or clicking OK, either one will do the job. And this goes into focus area. If you go into that, this opens up a page with crosshairs where you can see you can move the focus point. And something worth mentioning quickly, just going back to the main screen, you can access this quickly with the shortcut button on the D-pad down there. So while you're shooting on the fly, you need to quickly change your autofocus point, click down and then use your D-pad to actually change the location. And if you use your scroll wheel, you can enlarge or shrink the autofocus square area, and this will change the area that that your autofocus point will focus on, which is a nice little feature. Back into the menu there, we go down to macro, and you have an option of macro and super macro settings. The macro settings on this camera are absolutely amazing, and it will focus at very, very close distances. Probably the best of all non-interchangeable lens cameras I've ever had for macro use, in fact. Below this we have release focus priority. This is not something I've used, so I'm afraid I can't go into great detail about that at the moment, but if anyone wants to know what that's about, I can look that up and find out. Okay, we have instant autofocus setting, AFC and AFS. Below that we have AF mode, and you can have a multi-point AF, which is great for your sort of point and shoot use. Area, which is selectable area using the cross points and the box location that I've shown you there, and tracking, where it will actually track a face or a moving subject. And we have a pre-autofocus on and off, and then an autofocus illuminator. This is the LED on the front of the camera. Next up we have the ISO settings. This is adjustable from 100 up to 3200 in normal situations, but expandable to 12,800 in certain situations, which we don't need to go into at the moment, but you can see on there that above 3,200 are greyed out, and depending on your shooting situations they will be available to you. In addition to that, we have 3 auto settings, and within the auto settings you can set the default sensitivity, the ISO that you would prefer to be used, the maximum sensitivity that you're prepared to use, and the minimum shutter speed, all of which are great little adjustable functions. So if you're shooting outside in daylight, you can say my preference is ISO 100 and my minimum shutter speed I want to be 1/100th of a second, and I don't want the ISO to go any higher than say 400. So what that will do, the camera will try and balance between those and give you the best balance. It will try and give you ISO 100 where it can, and if it can't get the shutter speed at ISO 100, it will move up, and it will only go as far as your highest ISO that you set. Now you can set 3 functions, 3 auto functions. So auto 1 you can set at a preference of ISO 100 for outdoor shooting. Auto 2 you could set at a preference of say ISO 400, going up to 3200 for indoor shooting, and so on and so forth, but I'm sure you get the idea with that one. Underneath this we have image size, and you can see we have a variety of options to choose from. Between we have large, medium and small, which is typical of course for pretty much any digital camera, although to be honest the medium and small, because memory cards are so large and so cheap capacity wise, nowadays there's absolutely no reason to shoot at a lower resolution unless you're specifically just shooting for straight from camera images to upload as JPEGs, and you need them in a lower resolution for web. So you've got 4/3, 3:2, 16:9 and 1:1 square format to choose from in large. And then underneath this you have image quality, which gives you an option between fine, normal, fine plus raw, normal plus raw, or just raw. Again, likewise, there's no reason why you'd select anything other than fine JPEG setting, because you want large and fine setting for the best quality you can get. I also use raw as well. I like to shoot JPEG plus raw, because that way if you have an image that looks fine as a JPEG, that's great. But if you want to adjust the exposure in post, for example, then it's handy to have the raw file for additional tweaking. Underneath this we have dynamic range. Now you can set it to auto, and then you've got a choice of 100, 200 and 400%. This is all dependent on the ISO that you have set. At ISO 100 you can only have 100% dynamic range. At ISO 200 you can have 200% dynamic range, and at ISO 400 you can have 400% dynamic range, where this will adjust in camera the amount of dynamic range, which is great when you're shooting panoramas and landscapes. If you're shooting at ISO 200 or 400, it gives you a much wider dynamic range between sky and foreground, for example. Underneath this we have film simulation, and it's currently set to standard, which emulates the Provia film from Fuji. And underneath this we have Velvia, which is a vivid film stock, which is great for landscapes, vibrant greens and lush colours. Underneath this we have Astia, which is soft. These, you'll notice pretty much all of these, with the exception of a couple of generic ones and another specific one we'll get to in a second, are Fujifilm stocks. Astia was a very popular one for portraiture because it's a very soft colour and soft contrast, and gives a really nice sort of subdued dreamy look, which is great for portraiture. Below this we have classic chrome, which is sort of reminiscent of Kodachrome colours. Underneath this we have Pro Neg High, ideal for portrait with slightly enhanced contrast, and Pro Neg Standard, ideal for portrait with soft gradations and skin tones. Below this we have monochrome, black and white. And then we have monochrome with a yellow filter, monochrome with a red filter, and monochrome with a green filter, which are all nice little touches. And these obviously are for in-camera JPEGs, so straight from camera JPEGs. And then finally at the bottom we have sepia toned. And you can see, as I flip through, you can see that it will give you an idea on the screen of what these will look like. Now obviously it's hard to tell with the background that I've got on the screen there, which is not too great, but you will, when you're pointing that at a landscape and flicking through the options, you'll certainly see the difference. Moving down onto page 2, film simulation bracketing. If we move over here, you can choose between 3 different film types. Here for example you see I've got standard, Velvia, and I think that's Astia, is it? Yeah, standard, Velvia and Astia. Now you can choose any 3 of the film types that are on here to bracket, and this will shoot like you would with exposure bracketing. This will bracket your JPEG images if you choose to have this on in 3 different styles. So you could shoot a landscape with 3 different film styles and then see which one you prefer for straight out of camera images. Below this we have the self timer. Now this is obviously self-explanatory. We have 2 seconds and 10 seconds and off. And then below this we have interval timer shooting. Now this is an intervalometer, and it's highly customizable, as you can see here. So you can set how many times you want it to take an image on the right hand side, and how frequently you want it to take an image in hours, minutes and seconds on the left hand side. And you can flick between these and scroll up and down, and you can select right up to 999 images, as you can see there, and on the left hand side you can select whether you want it to take an image every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. seconds, every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. minutes, or every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. hours. So you can do some really, really long and interesting time lapses with this built-in intervalometer. Underneath we have the white balance, again another self-explanatory one. Auto is your standard one, the one that people tend to use for most day-to-day shooting, but you can set a custom white balance, you can set the Kelvin temperature, and then you've got your daylight, your fluorescent, your tungsten, and so on and so forth. And you can see there, you can tweak your little grid, your Kelvin grid. So you can select auto, but you can actually tweak this, and you can move down over here and make your images cooler, and you can move up here and over into the right hand side and make your images warmer, and down here and make them warmer still. So you can tweak your colour temperature in there as well as inputting it manually, which is a nice little feature too. Underneath this we have colour, and you've got your sort of average, neutral, and then you can sort of mute it, or you can punch it up and make it more vibrant. Again, this is colour straight from camera. Then we have sharpness, exactly the same thing. You can soften it or you can sharpen it. This is for out of camera images. Highlight tone, again the same thing. So you can increase or decrease the highlight tone of your in-camera images. And shadow tone, again the same thing. You can increase or decrease your shadow tone. Now all these settings are essentially the same kind of settings that you would use if once you're in post-production with an image and you want to do a bit of dodging and burning, you want to burn in the shadows, you want to, if you want to increase contrast and that kind of thing. So you can play about with those settings and get some really fun, pleasing images straight from camera. Underneath this we have noise reduction. Again, you've got you can reduce or you can increase the noise reduction in camera. You've got intelligent digital zoom. Now, personally, I think any kind of digital zoom is a complete waste of time, because all you're doing is sacrificing pixels. So that's off, but you can switch that on. And advanced anti-blur, which again is digital stabilization rather than the optical stabilization that's built in. So again, you're sacrificing pixels, so I leave that switched off. Next we move on to select custom setting, and we have got up to 7 custom settings, as you can see here. Now this particular menu just lets you select which one you want to use from 1 to 7. To actually edit the custom settings to your preferences, you go down to Edit / Save Custom Settings and over to your right, and then this shows you all of your custom settings. If you press the right key on the D-pad, this then shows you all of the portions of it that you can edit. So you can select which ISO this custom setting shoots at, you can select which dynamic range it uses, you can select the film simulation it uses, the white balance, the colour, the sharpness, the highlight, the shadow, the noise reduction, or you can reset it back to default. And you can set 7 of these, and the good thing about these is they are accessible quickly and easily by the quick menu button, the Q button, just above the D-pad. So you can press that, top left there, which you can select with the D-pad, click on that, sorry, let's do that again, quick menu button, and then using the scroll wheel you can click through C1 to C7. So it will say base as standard according to whichever one you currently have set, but say I want that set to C1, so I just OK that, and I know that that's set to my settings as per C1 in the menu setting. Now, because you've got 7 of these, this gives you a wide range of custom settings, so you can quickly flick through those on the fly, changing from going shooting outside to shooting indoors, to shooting video, to shooting a particular type of subject photography. So, for example, custom 1 is set for general outdoor use. Custom 2 is you can set to indoor use. Custom 3 you can set to, say, shooting concerts in dark sort of bars with flashing lights, and so on and so forth. And I have custom 7 is set to black and white with yellow filter, which is one that I use a lot when I'm out and about for certain shots, remembering of course that I shoot RAW as well, so I've always got the original RAW file and all the data saved, but sometimes I look at something and think that would look great in black and white, and I can just quickly flick to custom 7 and take a shot and see what that looks like on camera in black and white before I think about actually using that photo in black and white or editing it afterwards. Custom 6 I've set with a very neutral setting for video use. Underneath this we have face detection, which is currently turned off, and this can be used in conjunction with the tracking feature on your focus, which is great if you want to take video or take photos of moving subjects, which is very handy. So if you're at kids' parties, when you've got kids running around, you're taking family photos or video, or if you're at a sporting event and you've got people moving around but you want to track a particular subject, it's very handy for that. And also, of course, face detection is when you've got a crowd of people with other potential distracting objects that could get focused on automatically instead of the face that you're looking to focus on. It's also for that purpose as well. And below here we have photometry, which is your metering mode. So you have multi-spot or center weighted average, which is pretty much par for the course. Below that we have interlock, spot, auto exposure and focus area on or off. Now what this feature does is it will either combine or separate your autofocus and auto exposure area, so you can lock your exposure, you can lock your focus with a half press and then move your camera, recompose, and it will expose for the scene that's in the EVF or on the screen rather than where you're focused, if that makes sense. Manual focus assist. We've got standard or focus peaking. Focus peaking, you can change your peaking colours between white, red and blue, and either low or high contrast. A fabulous, very, very handy feature. This is something that you can get on the Canon with the aid of Magic Lantern, but this is a great feature for manual focus. So I'm just going to quickly flick to manual focus and try and show you that. Now it's difficult to see with this, but as I bring this stand into focus, you can actually see a blue line around the edge. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. Apologies if you can't, but it does work very well, and you can change the focus peaking colour, and that's really handy, especially when using the EVF. That's really handy for quickly focusing and snapping onto a subject, and knowing when you've got the focus peaking lines around that, knowing that you are in focus and where you need to be. Great feature, that one. Underneath this we have the control ring setting, and these are the same settings that you will get by using the quick menu button on the front and changing them with the control ring. So you've got default, which is whatever mode it's in. If it's in shutter priority mode as it is just now, then the default setting for the control ring is your shutter speed. If it's in aperture priority mode, the control setting for your control ring, default setting rather, is your aperture, and so on. But you can change this in any mode to do numerous features. You can change the film simulation, the ISO, the white balance, the shooting mode and so on. I tend to leave that at default because if I'm in aperture priority mode, I want to be able to switch back and forth up and down my aperture range quickly and easily, which the control ring on the front allows me to do, rather than have to go into a menu to do it. So I tend to leave that on default, but you can change it, which is handy. Below this we have the flash setup. You've got your flash mode, forced flash, commander and suppressed. The commander flash can be used for triggering an off-camera flash, which is a nice little feature, and suppressed is good if you just want a little burst of fill flash on a bright day outdoors, for example, if you're taking a portrait. And then you've got your exposure compensation as well, where you can adjust your flash exposure compensation up to 2 stops brightness. Let's just get back onto there and show you that again. So as you can, +2 or -2 exposure compensation in 1/3 increments, which is a nice little feature as well. Below this we have the movie setup. Now at this point I need to say there's a bit of an oddity with this camera as regards movie settings. The movie setup, you're including your ISO and everything else, your movie type, your frame rate, your ISO, and your microphone level adjustments, everything else has to be set within this. If you have the camera set to 100 ISO, that will not make any change to what your movies shoot at when you activate the movie mode on the camera, because it will take the ISO from whatever's set in here. So if, for example, you leave this set at ISO 100 in your movie ISO, and you're shooting indoors, it's relatively dark, you're taking photos on auto ISO, it's shooting at say 400, 800 ISO. You flick to movie mode, all of a sudden it's really dark. You don't understand why, because you've got the ISO set on your camera. This is why, it's all in this menu. This is something, once you know it's there, it's okay, but it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine, because you've got to kind of remember that this is a whole separate little entity within the camera. So all your movie settings for filming have to be set correctly in here. But then on the other side of it, things like your in-body image stabilization work as normal through the camera menu and will be active in movie mode. So you have to remember to disable that, for example, if you're tripod mounted in movie mode. So a little bit of an oddity, not a big problem specifically, but you know, a little bit of a bugbear for me, that one. It's I prefer the settings to globally affect the camera regardless of whether you're in stills or movie mode. But that's probably because that's what I've been used to be honest. As regards movie modes, you've got full HD up to 60 frames per second, and you've got 60, 50, 30, 25 and 24, which is obviously your movie-esque. Same for 720, and then we've got some lower resolutions that you probably never want to use for any reason other than you want to quickly Wi-Fi a video over to a computer and upload it for quick viewing in a small file size. But other than that, you're likely going to be using 720 or Full HD 1080. I tend to stick with 24, 25 frames per second, but again, it depends on what you're doing, depends on the project in question. Your movie ISO you can set between your selected ISO range. As I say, the ISO for your stills in camera are separate to this, so do remember that. I tend to leave that on auto unless I'm shooting in a particular specific lit area, and then I will set the ISO manually. Still shooting in movie mode, and you can select the priority. If you select still image priority, this might actually stall your movie you're filming, whereas if you select movie priority, it will prioritize your movie recording over your still image. Mic level adjustment, you can see on there the channels left and right, and you can see that as it goes up and it peaks, and I've got that set down to 3. If I just tweak that up, I might be able to get that to, it's peeking into the yellow. I don't know if it has red at the top, to be honest, I'm not entirely certain. But you can adjust the sensitivity of the microphone, which is nice. You remember when I was showing you around the body of the camera, the little plug in the side of the camera This can be used as a remote shutter release with a special Fuji shutter release cable. So you can open your little thing, plug that in, and you can use it as a shutter release, but you have to select the option in here as to what you want to use it for. So if you're using it for recording and it as a microphone, and it's set to microphone, obviously the shutter release won't work as a shutter release unless you set it in there. So that's your movie setup. Below that we have your wireless communication. And this will give you the settings that that you can choose to set in here. As you can see, it's got my my Samsung phone in there, and on which I have a Fujifilm wireless app for viewing the screen remotely, which is a nice little thing. It's a free app to download from the App Store and can be used with a range of Fuji cameras. So you can Wi-Fi to your phone or to your tablet, and it as you can see, it's disconnected at the moment, and that's a really nice little feature. And then as you can see, we're back to page number 1 of the camera menu. So in this next stage we're going to look into the tools menu. Now this particular section is necessarily long, unfortunately. I do apologise for the length of this, but if you're not needing to know anything specifically in the menu section, then please skip forward to the rest of the review, where I will show some sample images and what have you, and talk about the usability of the camera. But for the purpose of anybody that's new to this and wants to know all the details, then keep watching, and we're going to go through, on the left hand side here, we're going to go through all of the camera setup features under the blue tabs here, the date, time and languages, and edit the quick mode, and setting up your wireless stuff and all that kind of fun stuff. So so stick around, and we're going to move on to that in just a moment. So moving on in this next portion of the video to the settings menu, which is the blue wrench icon on the left hand side, the spanner icon. And up at the top of page 1 we have date and time, which is obviously where you set the current date and time. Below this we have time difference, which is your time zones, and you can set between home and local. Home is obviously the one that you set in your date and time window, and then you can set plus or minus however many hours for your adjustments to the place that you might be visiting, for example, on holiday. So this will reflect in your metadata. Below this we have language. Of course, you select your language of choice between English, French, German, Spanish, Japanese, what have you, you know, long list of languages there. Below this you have reset, and you have an option of the shooting menu reset to default and the setup menu reset to default. So you can reset both of them or each one individually. Below this you have silent mode, which is a simple on-off option. This is something I don't really see the point of, because the camera in operation is incredibly silent already. Silent mode actually stops the use of all sounds and what have you as well, but you can disable those independently too. However, it is there if you just want to quickly switch the whole lot off or on. Control ring, you can choose between clockwise and counterclockwise operation, which is handy if you're used to a particular format of lens for focusing, for example. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but typically your two main contenders, Canon and Nikon, both the lenses for both tend to zoom in opposite directions to each other, so that's kind of handy to be able to switch between those. Below this you have manual focus check, off or on. And then on to page 2 we have the sound setup. You can adjust or switch off the operation volume, adjust or switch off the shutter volume. This is for the fake shutter sound. You can change the shutter sound between 3 options, and then you can adjust your playback volume for your videos. And why it has a fake shutter sound, I'm not sure. Some people like that maybe, but the shutter sound is nicely very quiet in operation, as I will demonstrate later. Below this you have the screen setup. You've got image display off or on, EVF auto rotate displays. What this does is when you change from landscape to portrait mode, it will actually change the the orientation of the information display. So all of your settings at the bottom of the screen that show your shutter speed and your aperture and what have you will actually change to be still at the bottom of the screen, which is a nice little touch. Preview exposure in manual mode, which gives you a preview of what you're shooting. Monitor sunlight mode, off or on. This I'm not entirely sure, but I think that brightens it if you're shooting in strong sunlight. EVF brightness auto, or you can adjust that accordingly in manual. EVF colour, again you can adjust. Below that you have LCD brightness and LCD colour, exactly the same things but with the LCD rather than the EVF up here. Preview pick effect, on or off. Framing guidelines, you can choose between a grid of 9 squares, a grid of 24 squares, or HD framing. This will put lines at the top and bottom of your screen showing you what you would get in movie mode, which is quite handy if you want to take pictures that are to be included in a video later. Auto rotate PB, I have no idea what that is, it's on or off. That's something I'm not sure about. I'll have to have a look at that and hopefully annotate that at the bottom of the video. And display custom setting, so you can select with tick boxes what you want to show in your EVF or on your LCD screen. And then we're back to, are we back to the start there? I think we're back to the start there. Yes. Image display, EVF, auto rotate, etc. So there's quite a lot in that submenu for the screen setup, as you can see. Below this we have function setting, FN buttons, and this is where you customize your function buttons, and you get this nice little display which shows you which button you're altering as you scroll up and down them. For example, you can see there the function 1, which is up on top of the camera up here, which is your default video record. I have changed to flash exposure compensation because I found that it's a button that I was catching quite a bit when going for the shutter button and unintentionally recording video, and because you don't have to lock this camera to a particular video mode. So then I changed FN6, function 6 button, which is the one in the bottom right hand corner there, the FN button, Wi-Fi button. I changed that to be the default video recording button, which works better for me. But you can do the same for all of these. You can alter them all to whatever function you have in the list there. It's a nice little touch. Below this you have the selector button setting with a choice between function button or a focus area option. The Q menu up here, and this is basically, accesses the quick menu, which can be done by just pressing the Q button up here. Power management, and you can set how many minutes before it auto powers off, quick start mode, whether that's on or off, power management, and you can adjust power save or high performance in there. I find that this is not the quickest camera to wake up, and rather than waste battery by using the high performance settings, what I found easier was just to simply switch the camera off and then switch it on when you need to shoot, because the startup is very quick from twisting the lens for it to be operational, and it's much quicker than the wake up option. Below this we have the image stabilization mode, and you have a choice of image stabilization when shooting, shooting in motion, continuous or continuous in motion, or off. On to page 3, red eye removal, self-explanatory, on or off, and this will automatically remove red eye that you get from flash use indoors typically. Auto exposure and autofocus lock mode, and you can select whether you want them to lock when pressing the shutter button or using the AF lock button up here on the back of the camera. Then you can tell it what you want the AE and AF lock button to do, whether you just want it to lock the exposure, lock the focus, or do both. Then we have the save data setup. This is where you will select whether you want the frame number to be continuous or to start new after you format your card. You've got the date stamp on or off, etc. Underneath here you've got focus scale units, and you can choose between feet and meters. Underneath here you have your wireless settings, your Wi-Fi. You've got your general settings, which gives you the name of the camera, which you can rename to My Camera or whatever you choose. And then you can reset the wireless settings back to default. Resize image for smartphone, on or off. What this will do when you shoot through the app, it will automatically resize the image if it's selected on, and if it's selected off it will give you a default full size image. Now this is great if you just want to take a quick snap to upload straight to your Instagram or to the web or what have you. And in your PC autosave settings you have details of previous connection, which will tell you what happened during the previous connection, and delete registered destination PC. I don't have one set up in there, hence, it's not there. And speaking of that, directly below the wireless settings we have PC auto save setting, simple setup and manual setup, and you can set up a connection to a specific PC, and then in this one above you have the option to delete that should you wish to do so. On to page 4 we have the geotagging setup, and you can select whether geotagging is off or on, and your location info is off or on. That's not something I'd bother with. I know a lot of people like to do that, so they like to be able to pinpoint exactly where the photos were taken. I tend to take photos and then I'll download them to folders, so I know sort of the dates and times that I took those photos anyway. But it's handy to have that there if you like that kind of thing. Instax printer connection settings. Now obviously this is it's a Fuji camera, and it can be coupled directly to a Fuji Instax printer, as many other cameras can be, but you've got customizable options within the camera itself to print to an Instax printer. Edit file name, and you can select what you wish the file names to be called, so you could put your own initials in there if you wish, for example. And then finally at the bottom you've got an option to format, and this will erase all data on the memory card. So that's the entire menu, including all of the sub-menus, from the shooting menu right through and including the setup menu. And we're going to exit from there, and I'm just going to pop into the preview menu. Now there's no image in there currently. Press the menu button and you'll see that we get a few extra little ones, which is the playback menu. So we're just going to go through those. Wireless communication, and this gives you the information that you need, and it will start scanning for your Wi-Fi device. So I'm just going to disconnect that and go back. PC auto save, again you've got to have the PC set up on there. Image search, there are no images on here, which is why it's not opening, but this will allow you to search for a specific image. Erase, and you will be able to choose which images you wish to erase or save. Mark for upload to, and then you can select from a list of YouTube, Facebook, FinePix, etc. Slideshow, and this will run with various options, normal, fading, etc. And this will run through the images that are on your camera. Raw conversion, and again there's nothing on there to play with, so that's grayed out currently. Red eye removal. Protect, where you can protect your images and save them from deletion, frame by frame or all of them. Crop, where you can select the crop mode that you want your images to be in, which again is not selecting because there are no images on there. Resize, likewise, you can resize your images for upload to the web, for example. Image rotate, if you wish to flip one way or the other. Copy, it's telling me there's no memory card in there at the moment. So you can copy from, I don't know if that's to copy from the memory card to the camera, maybe, I'm not entirely sure. Photo book assist, which again is an online service. Print order, this is if you're ordering prints directly online. Instax printer setup, or Instax printer print rather, so if it's connected to an Instax printer you can just select your image and go straight to print. And your display aspect ratio for on-screen viewing. And then over here we've got exactly the same buttons in your setup menu as we do with the normal setup. So that's the entirety of the menus. This bit was a very long portion, I'm aware of that, but as I say, necessarily so because there are lots and lots of features on this camera that come with the camera by default. And it's really is a very full-featured little fully functional manual operational camera, as you can see there. So in addition to that, we have numerous buttons and dials, as I've already shown you in the previous part. So what we're going to do now is have a look at the overview of the use of the camera and then look at some sample images. So that's the in-depth portion of the review and the menu system out of the way, and we'll come to the final portion of the video, which is just a kind of overview and my view of this camera in use. Now the camera is not such a lightweight as you'd expect. It has a magnesium alloy body, as I mentioned at the start of this video, and weighs in with battery at 430 grams. So it doesn't weigh a ton. It's not going to tie your arm out lugging it around. You could even shoot and hold and shoot one-handed with no problem, but it's certainly not the lightest camera out there, so be aware of that. But it does have a nice heft in the hand. Because of that, it feels like a good solid camera. And dimensions of the camera: the camera is 650 millimeters front to back, including the lens cap. So that's from the widest portion, which is the EVF, to the front of the lens cap. It is 1170 millimeters width, edge to edge like so, and 720 millimeters in height from the highest to the lowest point. Now the height is kind of deceptive because you've got this stepped bit here, but it is actually pretty even height all the way across. It is still pocketable in a good sized coat pocket, or as I use myself, I tend to wear cargo pants or cargo trousers, depending on which part of the country you're from as to what you might call them. And they usually have quite a capacious pocket on the hip section, which is what I tend to use to put my carry round cameras in, whether that be digital or whether it be one of my analog cameras that I'm carrying, with the exception of SLRs, because obviously the mirror housing and the lenses on those typically make them too bulky to do that with. The camera in use is really good. It's incredibly well designed. It has this leather look and across the front and wrapping around here to give it that kind of vintage rangefinder feel, which will appeal to a lot of the older shooters out there, just because it looks very nice. It's got a beautiful retro look to it. You have a finger grip just here, which you can grip quite nicely with 2 or 3 fingers if you have very small hands. And as you can see there with my thumb waggling loose, it allows an incredibly firm, solid, reassuring grip of the camera with this rubberized texture, which wraps around the back here and to a thumb grip on the back, all in the same texture, so you can grip it very firmly, single-handedly, and still reach the shutter button, and you can even still use your thumb to flick your exposure compensation dial should you wish to do so. This gives your left hand relatively free to operate the manual focus if you wish, to zoom the lens, or if you wish you can hold it like this. Now if you're used to the SLRs and that kind of thing, your typical instinct is going to be to support it underneath and have your fingers around the lens barrel for zooming. So that works very well. The only criticism I can level at this is that my thumb instinctively wants to land here where the auto exposure lock button and the little dial, control dial at the back is. Now that's not such a problem because they do require a relatively firm press to actually operate any of the functions, but if you do happen to sort of grip it quite firmly, you can hit the auto exposure lock unexpectedly. And this is because the shutter button is here. Now if the shutter button was here, your thumb would instinctively want to sit here. Now this in itself is not a huge problem because you can buy a hot shoe adapter with a thumb grip with a little piece that bends out here, so your thumb will instinctively sit there and give you a good firm hold, and they're very cheap off eBay, for example. But with a little bit of training, you can train your thumb to instinctively sit over here on the actual rubberized thumb grip, which is designed for. The dials on the top allow you to flick between modes incredibly easy. Any serious shooter and is going to want as much creative control as possible. So because of that, like an SLR, you're going to use your MA and S modes, your manual aperture priority and shutter priority, and flick between those. Occasionally you P for program auto exposure when you want to let the camera do the bulk of the work and you just want to fire off some quick snaps. And really those 4 modes are the only ones that any photographer ever needs. Even a newbie to the whole photography scene who's still learning can get by with just slapping it on the P program auto exposure mode, and occasionally sort of playing with the shutter and aperture priority side of that as well. Although the panorama mode on this camera is definitely worth investigating because it's a really nice feature, and it can be customized on your on your LCD display or in your EVF as to which way you want to sweep it. So you can set it up so you can select between a range of degrees of panoramic sweep that you want to do, and you can select which direction you want to sweep, and you can even set it so that you can sweep top to bottom, which allows you to put the camera into portrait mode and get a much higher top to bottom pixel aspect ratio for your panoramic sweep, which is a nice little touch as well. It's a great fun mode, it's definitely worth a play with, but it has your MASP modes as all your serious cameras do, and that of course is the really sort of important part of a camera like this. Right next to that, very easily accessible and easy to change, is your minus or plus 3 EV mode dial, which will allow you to under or overexpose quickly and easily without having to go into your menu and change settings or change mode and alter anything in there. So that's a nice little feature as well. The shutter, as mentioned before, you can use an old-fashioned shutter release cable on it, or you can use an electronic one from Fuji in the hole at the side there. I've used an old-fashioned bulb-powered shutter release on this, works very well indeed. The flash is quick and easy to pop up when you need it for a little bit of fill flash, which is great for shooting portraits outdoors on a bright day, especially when you've got the sun behind the subject or just off one side but behind them, and you want a little bit of fill flash just to bring out the features. And overall it's an incredibly nice camera to carry and use. It's not so heavy that it's going to make your arm tired through a day's worth of use, but it's not so light that it feels insubstantial or cheap. It feels very rugged. It feels very rugged and very sturdy and very well built, and it feels like a camera that could take a lot of knocks and bumps and rough handling. Obviously that's not something anybody wants to do, but it does feel like it could take a little bit of abuse if you're in a situation where it might do so, which in essence would make it a great travel camera as well as a great everyday camera. And then of course the zoom range from 28 to 112mm equivalent of full frame is a good usable zoom range, enabling you to take good wide angle shots and good zoom shots and nice portraits as well around the sort of 85 to 100mm range. And then coupled with the macro function inside this camera, you can get some stunning macros. At this point there's little else to say about the camera itself, and I'm going to show you a sample now. This next portion of the video is going to show you a sample of some photo examples. The images that you're going to see in this next portion of the video are all JPEG straight from camera images, and they have had no post-processing whatsoever, no sharpening in post. The only thing that's happened with them is they've been resized from 4000 pixels wide to 1000 pixels wide for web upload to my Flickr account, and other than that they've had no post-processing whatsoever. The only exceptions being the few black and white ones that you'll see, which have had a simple straightforward desaturation and then a very slight S-curve in the curves to boost the contrast, because the contrast by default out of the camera is a little bit flat, which is nice because it gives you a little bit of range to work with. Other than that, the colour images are exactly as shot, and the reason for this is to show you how vibrant and sharp and fabulous they look straight out of the camera. So you can literally take this camera on a holiday with you, set it into your chosen mode, snap away, and know that I would say 98-99% of the times you're going to get a very well exposed, excellent JPEG shot straight from the camera without having to worry about post-processing and sharpening and the like. So without further ado, we'll move on to the gallery. You can take a look at that, and this will be just a few sample images, and if you look in the description box below the video, you'll see a link to my Flickr gallery where you can view all of the JPEG images that have been taken with this particular camera. So for all of you guys watching this, it's been a very long one. Thank you for sticking with it. I really hope you've found this useful, especially if you've been looking into getting one of these yourself, or one of the earlier X20s, or even one of the X100 series cameras. They are excellent cameras. They do take a little bit of getting used to if you're moving from a different system, but nothing overly complicated. There's lots and lots of cool features included as standard, and they are well worth your time and investment. So thanks again for watching. I hope you found this useful, and we'll see you in the next video.